Look at that.
Oh my goodness. I don't know
Even-
that they don't need to hear this part.
Or chit chat.
Yeah, and the other thing, Sherry, is that
Then perfect. Well, welcome everybody to the spring member and community meeting of the Laverne Historical Society. I'm Sherry Best. I'm the president of that organization, and I'm very delighted for us to hear about another facet of preservation, restoration, and conservation, and that is of the geography of our land, because that's important historically as much as the things that we build on the land. So I am delighted that this opportunity came our way. I would like to announce to members of the Historical Society that we'll have our first in-person meeting, or our summer meeting will be in person. I'm negotiating to have that happen at Hillcrest, and we'll see about that. And if not, it'll be at the Veterans Hall, but just keep an eye on your email and you'll see that, you'll see those changes. I'll make those announcements, but I want to go straight into the presentation, and I'm going to announce our three speakers, and then I will mute my microphone for the rest of tonight's talk. And our first speaker is Arlene Andrew, who has spent much of her career in city planning and historic preservation. She was a senior planner for the city of Laverne for 20 years and an historic preservation planner for the city of Cucamonga. Arlene served on the Clermont Planning Commission and the Greater Pomona Housing Development Corporation, and is currently a board member with the Claremont Committee of Aging. She's been a board member of many additional organizations, the League of Women Voters, the California Preservation Foundation, House of Ruth, Claremont Heritage, and the Claremont Wildlands Conservancy. That's a lot of involvement, Arlene. That's very, very impressive. Lissa Peterson, our second speaker, founded and directed programs for international studies at the Claremont colleges. She ran a writing center and taught courses in writing and in academic English for international students for more than 30 years. Soon after she arrived in Claremont in 1974, she discovered the joy of hiking in Claremont's foothills. In 2003, when listed in a new organization named Claremont Wildlands Conservancy had formed to save Johnson's Pasture from the threat of development, she signed up. She's been a board member ever since and was president for 6 years. She currently chairs the Acquisitions Committee, which focuses on expanding the Wilderness Park. So welcome, Lissa. Meg Mathias came to Claremont in 1964 to teach for 1 year as a sabbatical leave replacement in the biology department of Pomona College. The following year, she joined the newly formed Joint Science Department, now Keck Science, of Scripps Pitzer and Claremont McKenna Colleges, where she taught various biology courses for 37 years. She retired in 2002 and became active in volunteer work and community affairs. She participated in the campaign to save Johnson's Pasture in 2006 and joined the board of Claremont Wildlands Conservancy the following year. She played a key role in developing the CHWP master plan and is on the leadership team of the Friends of the Wilderness Park. Hardly a retirement, Meg. And finally, Muriel Poston is Vice President for Strategic Initiatives at Claremont McKenna College and is a professor of environmental analysis, a plant systematist with an interest in environmental studies. She has worked to support efforts to broaden the participation of underrepresented students and faculty in STEM disciplines and to enhance the capacity and infrastructure of the STEM facilities. She is currently a member of the board of directors of the American Institute of Biological Sciences, the board of the Organization for Tropical Studies, the Advisory Council of the California Botanic Garden, and a member of the board of the Claremont Wildlands Conservancy. This is an enormous depth in knowledge and activity in the city of Claremont and beyond. So I welcome all of you. Thank you so much for giving your time. And I will turn it over, I believe, first to Arlene. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm Arlene, and thank you. Thank you for inviting us. We're very pleased to be here. Lissa, Muriel, and I are going to tell you about the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park, and Meg is in charge of the slides. And I'll tell you, we go through our narrative and then we take questions at the end. But first, I want to mention that this presentation is focused on Claremont and created for Claremont groups, but we will point out Laverne on our maps and briefly talk about Laverne at the end. We hope that learning about our grassroots efforts may be helpful to you in Laverne. I'll talk about the city's growth and hillside policies. Lissa will discuss the park's beginnings, the expansion, and the master plan. And Muriel will talk about the future. So up until 1997, except for a 40-acre parcel called Sycamore Canyon, undeveloped hillside land north of the flatlands of Claremont was in private hands. But today, 2,500 out of 3,100 hillside acres are within the boundaries of the Wilderness Park. So how did this change come about? This is the story. In the beginning, abundant hillside plants, trees, animals, and water helped indigenous populations flourish before colonists came and displaced them. In the late 19th century, with the arrival of the railroad and the establishment of colleges and towns in the area, local students and residents started venturing up to the hillsides. The C.C. Johnson family, who purchased hillside land, picnicked and hiked there, and you can see some picnickers up in the corner. And later, Claremont residents planted flowers and trees on what became known as Johnson's Pasture. Nearby property owned by the Gale family flourished as an Angora goat ranch. And you see some of those goats, and you see the Gale, I forget which Gale it is. Claremont for decades was confined to the town site around the railroad depot, which was the case in Laverne as well, but gradually grew north to Foothill Boulevard, seen in the lower right-hand corner of the photo. It arrived in Claremont in 1931 through the efforts of Frank Wheeler, called the grandfather of Foothill Boulevard. And then you see the old Claremont High School on the right part of that photo. Housing in the hillsides was initiated in 1925 by a man named H.H. Garner, who developed the Padua Hills neighborhood. His intention was to build an elegant community, fostering artists and not, in his words, a honky-tonk sort of place. In 1930, he and his wife, Bess Garner, established the Padua Hills Theater, and you see that in the photo here. As Claremont grew, the flatlands between the town center and the hills were planted with vast acres of citrus trees, also the case in Laverne. And by the 1950s, development was creeping north and the city was growing, but the hillsides remained unincorporated county land. Now, a little bit about city policies. The city's leaders saw a need to establish rules to steer future growth in a manner acceptable to its citizens. So in 1956, they adopted a general plan. General plans are meant to encapsulate a city's vision for its future and to establish foundational policies and programs. They cover topics such as housing, open space, circulation, and many more. And all cities in the state of California have a general plan. And state law requires a city's zoning and other ordinances to be consistent with its general plan. Okay, so now we're gone from the 50s into the mid-1960s, when several large hillside parcels were annexed to the city. A dense hillside development at the top of Mountain Avenue named Claraboya shocked Clermont residents into the realization that the hills could be covered with housing if something wasn't done to control development. The photo on the right is courtesy of the Claremont Courier. Claraboya is now a fine neighborhood of mostly mid-century modern homes with spectacular views, all the more special because it is the only such neighborhood in Clermont. Johnson's Pasture, immediately north of Claraboya, was to be Claraboya Phase 2, and you see it in the map on the lower left. Mid-1970s owners, American Savings and Loan, attempted unsuccessfully to receive approval to build 356 houses there based on the zoning at the time, excuse me, of 2 dwelling units per acre. The map on the left shows the layout of the Claraboya lots, and the arrow above points to Johnson's Pasture. According to city historian Judy Wright, the hillsides could ultimately have been developed with almost 7,000 homes based on that zoning from the 1970s. So the first glimmer of an idea for parkland in the hillsides may have come about when the Claraboya developers deeded to the city 40 acres called Sycamore Canyon on the north side of the Thompson Creek Channel in exchange for higher density. That arrow on the left, the red arrow, points to Claraboya. The arrow on the right points to Sycamore Canyon, and the photo shows hikers enjoying Sycamore Canyon. The League of Women Voters played a pivotal role in moving the city to adopt regulations that would ultimately preserve hillside land. Their 1977 study, Claremont Hillside Development, you see the cover there, looked at issues such as fire, water, seismic danger, and the costs and benefits of hillside development. It contained recommendations for the Planning Commission and the Council to consider, and it cites pros and cons of each in typical league fashion, pointing out that although hillside housing would generate tax revenue, the costs of providing services, police, fire, street cleaning, trash collection, and so forth, especially in a hillside area, would exceed those tax revenues, and the city would essentially be subsidizing those developments. In 1977, the city adopted a natural environment element of the general plan. It established the foundation for a hillside zoning ordinance that could protect large portions of hillside land. League members Judy Wright and Diane Ring played an important role then and in future years. And without the League's leadership, the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park might never have come into being. That photo on the left from the League study shows the national forest boundary, and you can see the left part of it is way over to the left is Laverne. The League's work stimulated creation of a task force made up of residents, realtors, members of local organizations, commissioners, and council members. They tried to balance environmental concerns, property owners' rights, and community values. At first, they considered simple slope density zoning. This zoning allows more houses on flatter land and fewer houses on steeper, more remote land, which makes sense, but it would have resulted in an enormous amount of grading to create streets like Claraboya's Mountain Avenue. So the city hired planning consultant George Mader, known for skill in preserving hillside environments, and San Francisco attorney Antonio Rossman to work with the task force. Rossman was able to make a convincing and legally sound case for adapting a concept conceived for historic building preservation to land preservation. The result was adoption in 1981 of a groundbreaking hillside ordinance that contains a transfer of development scheme that allows houses to be built in certain cluster areas that are flatter and closer to roads and utilities, but also allows owners of land not in cluster areas to have the potential for some economic use of their land. Cities cannot simply zone away the value and the use of a piece of land by, for example, designating it as open space. So the ordinance, unsuccessfully fought by several opponents, was based on a concept that originated in New York City to preserve iconic Grand Central Station, which sat on land zoned for a skyscraper. And you see that in the sketch there on the right. Yeah. Developers wanted to build a big building on the site. Preservationists came up with the idea of having Grand Central sell its air rights, the right to build a very tall building, to a property owner elsewhere in Manhattan. This would enable the second owner to build a taller skyscraper than was allowed under the current zoning. The concept was legally challenged. The case went to the Supreme Court, and the validity of the transfer concept was established. So with Rossman's guidance, Claremont adapted the concept, but referred to it as a transfer of development credit scheme to avoid implying there was a right to build groups of houses on remote steep land. Consultant George Mader studied every privately owned, undeveloped hillside parcel. Using topographic maps, he estimated the number of houses that could, in theory, but not in actuality, be built based on a slope density formula. The steeper the slopes and the further from roads and utilities, the fewer the number of housing units or credits were assigned to that parcel. And you see the little yellow that contains the numbers. Housing could be built only in the flatter, less remote cluster areas shown on the map. So that's the map on the left. The map on the right shows the original clusters where houses could be built, and you'll be seeing that map again later. The owner of a cluster area, after buying credits, could then build more houses pending city approval, including meeting general plan policies, environmental quality provisions, and all zoning requirements. The ultimate goal was for the credits from donor parcels to be legally and permanently extinguished and the parcels to remain as open space forever. Here's a simple example of a parcel with 38 credits that is requesting 2 credits to build a total of 40 houses. It's in a cluster area. The owner buys 2 credits from a neighbor with 6 credits, leaving the neighbor with 4 and the receiving parcel with 40. That's a simple illustration of how it works. The ordinance has been used only once to create the neighborhood known as Stone Creek, shown in purple on this map. Land owned by the Garner family, about 1,400 acres, was bequeathed to Pomona College by alumnus H.H. Garner, who's the one who developed Padua Hills, in 1980. A dozen or so years later, negotiations between the city and the college resulted in development credits from 1,220 of Pomona College's acres being transferred to the cluster. The 1,220 acres became the Wilderness Park. The cluster got an increase in density, which increased its value, and Pomona College was able to sell the cluster to a developer who built the houses you see north of Baldy Road at Padua Avenue. And so with that, now Lissa will go into detail about the negotiations with Pomona College, the beginnings of the Wilderness Park, and later acquisitions.
Good evening. I'd just like to start by having you see why we love this land, why we love the park, and why we want to save it and expand it. First of all, just enjoy some pictures. And thank you, Meg, for. Okay, this aerial view shows you the urban wildland interface today, and you can see Laverne on the left. And Clermont is on the right, with the urban area extending up along Baldy Road. Okay, that's just to give you some orientation. In this slide. The next one, please. Thanks, Meg. This is the parkland that's in the foothills today. And the outlines you're seeing are parcels that were added to the wilderness parks over time. So just to orient you, the red arrow is pointing at Claraboya, which Arlene has been talking about, and that's at the top of Mountain Avenue. So that development is Claraboya, and the green arrow is the main entrance to the wilderness park, the Clermont Wilderness Park, at the top of Mills Avenue. So if you drive all the way up Mills, you'll come right into parking lots for the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park. The 2,500 acres of the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park those parcels are all in green. And Marshall Canyon Regional Park, which extends to Glendora across Laverne's sphere of influence, is in blue. And Clara Oaks, the parcel that we want to buy, and Muriel will be talking to you about that later, that's in red. Our Claremont Wildlands Conservancy's long-range vision is to have parkland across all of the foothills, from Clermont extending westward to link scattered green spaces into a continuous wildland corridor. And if we're successful, all of us are successful, it's not just us, it'll go all the way to Monrovia. There are lots of scattered green spaces and we just want them all connected. This is a table for Clermont's Wilderness Park of the chronology of acquisitions over time. How it went from nothing to 2,500 acres. So from 1975 to 2020, this happened. And the second column is the names. You will find the names of the acquisitions. But the fourth column is the important one because it's talking about the funding sources. And in that column, you can see that there have been negotiations and like Arlene was just talking about for the original Wilderness Park, and donations, but also much of the funding has come from state grants. Only one parcel has come from mostly local Clermont funds, and that's Johnson's Pasture in 2007. So, I was a little hesitant to show you this chart because it's a bit deceiving. It looks like we proceeded in very neat logical steps from the vision to the reality of today's wilderness park, but that is not what happened. The vision emerged after many years in fits and starts, and there was no grand vision of parkland across Clermont's foothills in the beginning. As Arlene said, Sycamore Canyon along the eastern side of Claraboya became a park in 1975. The city council created this park in negotiations with the developers of Claraboya, but most likely those council members expected the rest of the foothills would be developed in the future. They were still all in private hands, and the city council made no plans for any more parkland in the foothills at that time. However, in 1981, the city of Clermont adopted the new Hillsides ordinance with development credits, which Arlene just explained. And that started to change things because it opened up people's minds to the vision of Clermont's hillsides remaining green, because pockets of development would leave large swaths of natural open space. So with the ordinance in place, the next significant event was the opening of the original Claremont Hills Wilderness Park in 1997. And as Arlene told you, it was 1,220 acres. It was huge. It was really big. The next map here, which you're seeing again, this shows you the original park with the stripes. This is a 2001 map, and you can see the striped parcels are the original wilderness park. And the red arrow is Claraboya once again. Oops. And The green arrow is the entrance to the Wilderness Park at the top of Mills Avenue, okay? Now, the black areas, as Arlene told you, the dark charcoal gray areas are the cluster areas where development could occur. And the white parcels, the blank parcels, were still all in private hands at that time. Next slide, please. This is the loop trail, which is the most popular part of our park. And it's about 5 miles long. And most of it, I'm showing it to you now because most of it's in the original Wilderness Park. And it begins at the top of Mills Avenue. So the green arrow is the top of Mills Avenue entrance. The red arrow again is Claraboya. And that blue area is showing you this rather irregular oval loop that is what most people think the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park is, because that's where most people go, as you can see in the next picture. Today, the loop is very popular. And by the way, it connects to the Marshall Canyon Trail. And you can hike from Marshall Canyon at the top of Stevens Ranch Road, I think it is. You can hike from there all the way to the loop and around the loop and back if you've got a day, or the better part of a day, or if you're a very fast walker. So I want to talk to you now about how the original park happened in a little more detail than Arlene gave you. She gave you the big picture, and here's how it happened. It took 8 years of deliberations with the city and the owner of the land, Pomona College, falling in and out of agreements. I just want to tell you about one breakthrough meeting. 2 Pomona College officials met with the city manager at the time, Glenn Southard, and Mayor Diane Ring and Councilwoman Judy Wright. And both Diane and Judy, as Arlene told you, had been very active in the League of Women Voters. They'd both been presidents, and they both worked on the 1977 Hillside study. So they were completely on board with creating more parkland in the foothills. Well, but the initial assumptions going into the meeting were not that there would be a park. Pomona would develop the cluster area on the flatland along Mount Baldy Road, and then the college would donate the hillside land to a nature conservancy. And the city's main concern at the time was simply to prevent development in the hillsides, to keep the houses out of the hillsides. That was their main purpose. But suddenly in the middle of the meeting, someone from the city, and there's a debate about whom, said, well, why don't we buy it? And there was just this long, stunned silence because nobody had been thinking in those terms. But that's what they did. They agreed that the city would buy all of the land from Pomona College. And then the city would sell the cluster area to a developer and retire the development credits on the hillside parcels. They weren't thinking about a park. They were just thinking about preventing development in the hillsides. So the city started making monthly payments to Pomona College. And in the end, the city paid over $1 million. But after a year or so, there was an economic downturn and the city could no longer afford to make the monthly payments. So they were in danger of defaulting. But thanks to the good relationships that had developed, Pomona agreed to let the city keep the hillside land in exchange for the city's help and money with the entitlement process and the specific plan for the cluster area, and for the hillside development credits, which the city transferred to Pomona's cluster, as Arlene explained, making it more valuable. Well, the deal smoothed the way for Pomona to sell it to a developer, and today the Stone Creek neighborhood has about 125 homes along Baldy Road. So what happened here is that the determination of the city's negotiators to protect the hillsides led them a step further. It led them to create the original Claremont Hills Wilderness Park. Still, in the 1990s, there were large cluster areas for housing in the hillsides, and Johnson's Pasture was the largest and the most vulnerable. By By 1999, Johnson's Pasture faced a serious new threat of development. Its 180 acres could be developed with at least 125 homes. So in 2000, 3 local women formed Claremont Wildlands Conservancy, and we call it CWC, so I'm going to call it CWC from now on. And it had a very narrowly focused goal: save Johnson's Pasture. This, at the time, was not likely. Everyone expected that it would be developed. Well, one of these 3 women was named Suzanne Thompson, and she was the main leader of CWC for the first 10 years. And she was a professor at Pomona College, by the way. She and other founders made the organization a nonprofit. They raised money and they recruited members. And crucially, they formed a partnership with the national nonprofit Trust for Public Land, which has an office in Pasadena. And the Trust for Public Land negotiates land deals to save open space. In October 2003, the Padua wildfire, which many of you may remember, swept through the foothills on Santa Ana winds. It finally ended in Laverne, but in Clermont, it destroyed 66 homes and damaged 23 more. And that reminded everybody of the hazards of developing in the foothills. And it further motivated the city, which now had a wilderness park and wanted it to grow. So in 2003 and 4, the city added 3 more parcels, which are marked on this map here with green arrows. The light gray parcels were still privately owned. And as you can see, the original 1,220 acre wilderness park is in black. Well, how did the city do this? It took strong city council backing. And with that backing, city manager Glenn Southard deputized his young assistant, Jim Lewis, who is now the city manager in Pismo Beach, to work with CWC and the Trust for Public Land to buy up more parcels. So Jim and the Trust for Public Land project manager went around to the owners of parcels in the foothills, private parcels, and negotiated deals with 3 willing sellers and secured state funds for the purchases. By now, the vision of a grand wilderness park over much of Clermont's hillsides was becoming a reality. And the next prize was Johnson's Pasture. It became part of the park in 2007. And you can see it, we've marked it here with the blue arrow, and below it is Claraboya. And you can see Mountain Avenue there coming up to the top of Claraboya. Okay, you can see here why Johnson's Pasture is so special. These are some of the eucalyptus trees that were planted by the Johnson family's friends in the first half of the 1900s. And most of them survived the recent windstorm, by the way. I was just up there last week. Cece and Louisa Johnson were the original owners and namesakes. And in 1950, Louisa died and the land was sold to the Musgrove brothers for $750,000. In 1960, they sold the lower slopes to the developers of Claraboya. Johnson's Pasture, as you can see here in the blue rectangle, was destined to be the second Claraboya phase 2, as Arlene said. And you can see why, because it's directly above Claraboya. A merciful bankruptcy prevented that from happening in the 1970s. In the 1980s, 3 developers walked away after failing to overturn the transfer of development credits provision in the city's Hillsides ordinance. But by 1999, with a strong economy, another developer was seriously interested. Now, as I said, Johnson's Pasture is the only parcel in the park that's mostly paid for by Clermont taxpayers. And success in saving it was the result of 2 intense political campaigns in 2006. The land was originally appraised at $12 million. And at first, the city council and voters all wanted to save Johnson's Pasture, but they disagreed on how to pay for it. there could be a parcel tax or there could be a bond measure. Now, a parcel tax requires a majority vote and a bond measure requires 2/3. So a divided city council opted for the parcel tax, figuring it would be easier to pass. And these are some photos of that summer campaign for the parcel tax. The enthusiastic but divisive campaign failed miserably. When the mail-in ballots were counted on July 25th, 55% opposed and only 44% favored acquiring Johnson's Pasture. But the opponents still claimed that they supported the purchase, just not the parcel tax. So right after the loss, a unanimous city council and voters, liberals and conservatives, all types of voters, all came together to buy Johnson's Pasture with a general obligation bond. And they put it on the November ballot. CWC, some council members and many community members organized an all-out campaign. We called it Yes on Measure S. And on the campaign committee of 25 people, 9 were CWC board members. College students made t-shirts, and these 2 hikers are wearing those t-shirts. Supporters posted yard signs. Artists held benefit shows. CWC circulated brochures like this one. Supporters sent mailers, walked door to door, lobbied at grocery stores. I remember Meg and I lobbied a grocery store once. We gave talks, we wrote letters to the editor, we drove voters to the polls and became poll watchers. College students convinced their friends to register to vote in Clermont and then to get out and vote. CWC board members made $1,000 pledges. And at one point, they even delivered a whole wagon load of letters to the city council during a council meeting. It was kind of a dramatic gesture. The result was over 72% voted yes. We saved Johnson's Pasture. And that's the front page of the Clermont Courier, our local newspaper. And on the right there is Suzanne Thompson, who was not only president of CWC at the time, she was also co-chair of the Yes on Measure S campaign. 2 secrets of the success were that we had no organized opposition. The campaign included everyone. And Johnson's Pasture really is the well-loved crown jewel of the hillsides that the campaign had claimed it was. Okay, moving on, in 2010 and 11, Trust for Public Land and CWC worked with the city to acquire Gale Ranch with state grant funding. The green arrow marks the property. 2 state agencies agreed to split the cost of $4.8 million. And as you can see here, Gale Ranch is strategically located between Johnson's Pasture and the main park entrance on Mills. And there is a trail that connects the pasture with the entrance to Mills. The Gale family that ran the Angora Goat Ranch, Arlene told you about, had owned it for over 100 years, but they had sold it in 1984, and it was sold again before becoming part of the park, as again in 2011. Well, from 2013 to 2016, the city did something else other than acquiring land. They developed the Hillsides master plan with a lot of support and work from CWC. Well, why did the city create a master plan? Why do this? Well, what was happening was there were problems. By 2013, the park's popularity had exploded with a little help from Yelp. Estimates were over 320,000 visits a year, and that number was growing. And neighbors were really concerned about noise, traffic, parking, pedestrian safety, trash. The city council tried to ameliorate them. They expanded the parking lots and added fees for parking. But then more cars parked on the streets. And then it responded to complaints as they arose, the city council did, by instituting residential permit parking on one street after another. But it was kind of a piecemeal approach. It wasn't coherent. It was just reactive. So CWC urged the council to create a master plan for overall good management of the park. It had 3 goals: to preserve the park as an environmental resource, to provide passive recreational opportunities for visitors, and to minimize the impact on neighbors. And after extensive community involvement, City Council adopted the Hillsides Master Plan in May of 2016. So it took about 3 or 4 years to create it. As a result, the city now has a robust ranger program and a loyal volunteer group, Friends of the Clermont Hills Wilderness Park, which Meg is a member of, the Friends group. Trust for Public Land calls our park one of the best managed parks in the San Gabriels. The final 2 additions to the park were donations. The first was the 463 acres of Evie Canyon in 2017. And you can see there, it's huge. It's all green parcels, and that green arrow points to them. Pomona College owned that land, and it saw how well managed and safe from development the park was, so it donated the Evie Canyon parcels. I do want to tell you, because we gave this talk in Clermont, and then a couple people went and tried to hike Evie Canyon because I talked about it, and they couldn't get in. And that's because right now, over where Meg has the cursor, the city has blocked the entrance because there are serious and dangerous parking problems along there. There has been some crime. And so the city is trying to make matters work before it opens that entrance from Mount Baldy Road, which is the most direct way if you want to park and hike Evie Canyon. That's the way to do it, but it's closed right now. It will be opening in the future, and you can hike into it from within the Wilderness Park, but it's a long hike to the east, but it's doable. I want to keep this map up a little bit longer, just so you can see almost all of the park as it is today, everything but the final parcel. The yellow is the original park of the 1,220 acres. The tan stripes are the parcels that were added from 2003 to 2011, and the blank white areas are parcels that are still today in private hands. And the next 3 slides are just a few pictures of Evie Canyon, so that you can see just what a great gift it is to all of us. Okay, oh, could you go back one, please, Meg? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you're right. The map. Okay. Finally, in 2020, the Bertolina family, a private family, donated their 20 acres west of Johnson's Pasture. And Meg is marking it for you there. And the red arrow also marks it. CWC worked very closely with the family and the city and to make this donation happen. And we even contributed to the closing costs. This parcel is small, but it's really important because you can see that it's a bridge to the wildland corridor to the west in Laverne's sphere of influence, and to Marshall Canyon. So what I want to do before I pass the baton to Muriel is just review. Just as the city's vision of the hillsides has evolved over the years, so has Claremont Wildlands Conservancy's. Its urgent initial focus was totally on Johnson's Pasture, saving Johnson's Pasture. But CWC's mission today is much broader, and it has 4 main prongs. The first is conserving all of Claremont's foothills within the Wilderness Park, if possible. And it may not be possible, but that's our goal. The second is connecting the park to a continuous wildland corridor along the San Gabriel foothills, moving westward through Laverne, Glendora, and as I said, all the way to Monrovia if possible. The third is assuring public access to the park. And the fourth is educating visitors on the importance of appreciating and protecting the park and its natural resources. And we're really on the verge of starting some educational programs for young people. And at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Muriel, who will talk to you about Clara Oaks, which is marked in pink on this map. Muriel, I think you're muted.
I just unmuted myself. Thank you. Why don't we roll over a slide, Meg? I think we got this as a duplicate slide, but here you see Clara Oaks, which is the pink, and it extends a bridge to the parklands on the west. And as we review the history of the park and the role of Claremont Wildlands Conservancy has played in helping it grow parcel by parcel, it forms a green beltway in our hillsides. But as the areas shown in white remind us, there's still significant parcels in private hands. And we are continuing to work with the Trust for Public Lands to try to add these to the Wilderness Park. Our current effort is to buy the Clara Oaks property, which is shown here in pink, and you'll become familiar with this sort of upside down L shape over the next several slides. Next. The close-up shows you its location in relation to neighbors west of Claraboya, the blue arrow, and immediately north of the Webb School, the red arrow. And you can see the slash, that's the debris field that's owned by LA County Fire Department. And it's for, as you know, mudslides after fires, etc. In 2016, Randy Lim, a Canadian developer, purchased the 103-acre parcel and called it Clara Oaks with the intention of putting 45 to 50 luxury homes on it. But in the spring of 2018, after 2 years of planning and a Clermont community meeting, Randy offered it to CWC. We enlisted the help of the Trust of Public Lands, and in August 2018, the property was appraised at $7.2 million, and Randy agreed that this would at least cover his purchase price and the cost at that time. However, after exploring various sources of funding, $7.2 million looked like a heavy lift for us. So in the summer of 2019, as a backup plan, Randy started the entitlement process with the city of Clermont, which involves an environmental impact report that is currently being done. He remains willing to sell it to CWC, but is continuing to pursue development to protect his investment. We believe that if the property does become entitled, the appraisal will probably increase to about $15 million. This map of Clara Oaks specific plan project initially study gives us a sense of the potential hazardous features that will impact Clara Oaks. And those include liquefaction zones, landslide areas, etc. The black diagonal lines indicate that the property is in an extremely high fire hazard severity zone. And I want to talk a little bit more about the impact of fire. As Arlene mentioned, there have been fires in the hillsides in perpetuity, but in between 1927 and 2003, the Clara Oaks property has experienced 7 fires. And here are the footprints. I'm going to go through the footprints of the 3 largest fires. This one is the 1962 fire. And the next slide shows you the 1979 fire. And then the next slide shows you the 2003 Padua fire, which Arlene mentioned earlier. And as you can see, all of them either encompassed or made a significant impact on Clara Oaks. An overlay of the 7 fires within the last 100 years shows that Clara Oaks is like ground zero. It certainly is a hot spot in the hillsides for fire. Looking at Clara Oaks property in greater detail, the map on the left, which you've seen before, shows the cluster areas. Note that the one in the lower left-hand corner, the small budge, extends up into Clara Oaks property. If you look at the developer's map on the right, you can see it is in this portion where he envisions the home lots and the streets. And one concern that immediately arises is the fact that there is a single access road connecting to Webb Canyon Road. A drive up Webb Canyon Road shows concerning features. First, you come to a sign for fire danger, then subject to flooding, then the road narrows, and next the road curves over a one-way bridge. And finally, you note that the road is lined by heritage live oak trees, which are protected, but would have to be sacrificed if the road were widened. Think about a large fire truck headed north on this road as residents or in private cars headed south to evacuate. Rather than just focusing on why the parcels should not be developed, I'd like to turn to some reasons why it should be preserved. Paul Falstich, professor of environmental studies at Pitzer College, has set up motion activated cameras which show the abundant wildlife in action on this property. These animals supported by the vegetation and terrain of Clara Oaks. And if this parcel could be bought and added to the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park, it would also help support the population of human animals who enjoy the park. And I hope that all of you have had a chance to visit the park. As Lissa mentioned, the master plan was the master plan, which was developed for the park, demonstrated as part of that master plan process, a survey of park users. The outcome shown here illustrates that the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park is really a regional park, with over 80% of the visitors coming from outside of Claremont. This table only gives partial data because it shows only the top 21 most frequent zip code areas. And that is demonstrating who actually has come to visit the park. Here's a map which shows this information in a different way. The green section is the Claremont Hills Wilderness Park, and the blue star is Clara Oaks. The heavy green line marks the 91711 zip code, the zip code for Claremont, and the black lines show other zip codes from which our visitors come to the park. The red indicates disadvantaged communities, and these communities are using the park and are an important part of what we hope will benefit if we can acquire and the funds through grants to acquire the Clara Oaks parcel. In summary, adding Clara Oaks property to Claremont Wilderness Park will preserve this land from development. This will protect the native vegetation and wildlife, help form a continuous wildlands corridor in our foothills, and prevent building homes in fire-prone territory. But to accomplish this, it all comes down to fundraising. State and county agencies are possible funding sources, and the Trust for Public Lands, with whom we are partnering, has expertise in submitting grant applications to them. But all granting agencies want to know that there is community support for such acquisitions, and they often ask for matching funds. We are thrilled that the city of Claremont allocated $300,000 out of its budget surplus to be spent on park expansion. Last September, the CWC board decided to launch a challenge campaign to raise money from the Claremont community. We pledged $75,000, which was the bulk of our funds, and challenged the community to match that amount in either donations or pledges. We placed ads and articles in the Courier, had a Courier insert, which is shown on the left, and made a poster for use at the entrance of the wildlife park and at the farmers market. The Folk Music Center featured the park in its window display and designed a lovely t-shirt as a donation. These t-shirts are available to anyone donating $50 or more in case you'd like to donate for us. And Lissa's going to model the t-shirt right now. There it is. You can see it on her chest. This graph shows the tremendous support we have received from the community. On the left is the $75,000 initial pledge from CWC. The right side shows the donations from the community that are currently at $95,000, shown in blue, and another $45,000 have been made or have been received as pledges, which will become payable when Clara Oaks reaches the time of escrow. The total so far is more than $210,000. That added to the $300,000 allocated by the city of Clermont demonstrates to granting agencies that our community supports the purchase of the Clara Oaks Park expansion and the preservation of open space. But we are not done. We continue to apply for grants and to accept donations. Each additional contribution both adds to the dollar amount and helps to show community support. We recently received the good news that 2 of our grant applications have been successful. Rivers and Mountains Conservancy approved $3 million with the strong encouragement of Senator Portantino, and the California Natural Resource Agency has granted $1 million from an environmental mitigation grant. Although we were not selected for funding from Measure A, there is other county money as well as state money and private foundations that we are applying to. We've been assured that with the support of the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy and with over 50% of the cost in hand to date, the chances are good that we will meet our goal. As we look back on the story of development of the park, one theme that stands out is the strong role of the community in our progress. The Johnson's Pasture campaign, the development of the master plan, and the current Clara Oaks effort all illustrate the active engagement of Clermont citizens. Most of all, we hope you visit the Wilderness Park for hiking, running, and enjoying nature. And we invite you to support the Claremont Wildlands Conservancy as we seek to preserve open space and to join our volunteer group, the Friends of the Wilderness Park. And we look forward to inviting all of you to our ribbon cutting when Clara Oaks is added to the Wilderness Park. I'd like to turn it over to Arlene now to say a few words about things that will be of specific interest to the Laverne community.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Muriel. A few points about Laverne. First, Laverne has a wilderness area in the northwest part of the city, and you see the map there. It's a total of 358 acres. The Trust for Public Land helped Laverne acquire 208 of those 358 acres in 2006 through state and county grants. The top part with the diagonal lines, I was surprised to learn, is within the National Forest and the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument. The little tail at the bottom, and that's illustrated on the right side, that has a proposed 1 mile trail, a loop trail in a 5-acre area. But you can see it's adjacent, you can kind of make out it's adjacent to rather intense development, and those are all backyards. So that would be facing that, that portion of the wilderness area. The Laverne Planning Commission reviewed a plan called the Laverne Wilderness Area Management and Public Access Plan in 2018 and 2019, and this is an illustration from that. But the plan has not yet been forwarded to the City Council for consideration and possible adoption. It may be partly because it seems to impinge on, there's close, it's really right up against people's backyards, and I think that may be part of the hesitation. So, but to find and review the plan, if you haven't looked at it, go to the website for the City of Laverne, click on Community Development, and then Wilderness Management Plan. And it's a long plan. There's a full environmental impact report there, and you may find yourself, getting more engaged in what's happening in that area. So the number 2, I just really this afternoon learned some interesting information. For the next slide, Meg. Yeah, back to this slide that we've seen before. And actually way over in the left-hand corner is the left-hand side first. Yeah, that's I didn't even realize that. That's the wilderness, the Laverne Wilderness area. Okay, Now, we're going to talk about that orangey yellow piece called, it's called Lackner, but it's now the Shang Property. And it's, I learned today, divided into 2 parcels. The north parcel is 113 acres and is a very steep land. The southern part, the south parcel, is 65 acres and it's quite flat. It was in 2016, it was purchased by Mr. Shang, and the 113 acres was $2.5 million, and the 65 acres, the south parcel, was $2.144 million. The flat southerly parcel has great watershed value. It's very rare, I learned today, to find undeveloped flat watershed areas in the middle of steep hillside slopes. They detain and absorb a lot of water from local mountain streams, and there are several mountain streams near that location. If the owner wishes to develop the land, an environmental impact report would be required. Now, staff from the Watershed Conservation Authority has concluded that there is justification for doing, within an EIR, a cultural resources study to see if there are artifacts or other evidence from the period when Indigenous people lived in these foothills. They may have lived there, they may have gathered, hunted, and fished here. Because of its flatness and the location of these streams, that's why they concluded that there really might be potential for finding something. Now, the land is not within the city of Laverne boundaries. It's in what's called the sphere of influence. But to receive local utilities and services, it would have to be annexed, and that's a major effort in itself. Right now, the county zoning is A1 light agriculture, which allows, in addition to farms and ranches, single-family houses. So Laverne residents may want to work with your conservancy. There is the Laverne Land Conservancy to look into prospects for setting aside this land area as permanent open space, and thereby helping to create the green corridor from Clermont to Monrovia that we've spoke of before. So that's the Laverne portion. Thank you. Any questions now? We'll turn it back to Sherry. We have Sherry there. You're okay, get on mute, Sherry.
I unmuted. I moved my laptop so my husband could watch along with me.
Okay.
Do any of you have questions to the group?
I'm wondering, is the Laverne Land Conservancy aware of and working towards the goal of creating that as a land bridge?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I made contact with the president of the Laverne Land Conservancy the other week, and she has moved. She now lives out of the area. And I don't know what the rest of the group is up to, but I could connect with her and see if maybe members of the Laverne Historical Society might want to meet with members of the Laverne Land Conservancy and kind of get up to speed with what they're involved with these days. So question, Carol, and I the impression I get is that group is quiet, that they haven't been active as CWC has been, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
I am not terribly acquainted with them.
Okay. Be interesting. I know of an attorney that worked with them previously, you know, if that were to be helpful at all. And I wonder if the previous, what was her position? President?
Yes.
Yeah. If she still has, even though moved, if she still has a interest in that area.
Well, I can definitely talk to her, Carolyn, and I would like to talk with you later about those connections.
Okay. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
That group was involved in the Laverne wilderness area in promoting access to that area. They did speak to the city council at that time. And also, I'll just say that the Claremont Heritage has kind of expanded to include natural resource preservation in there, and the things that they're interested in. And so I was thinking that this cultural resources aspect might be of interest to the Historical Society, and finding that there, that might be another potential source of volunteer work if
Right.
you're interested in that.
That's a very good point, Arlene, and it might be interesting to see if there's anybody at the University of Laverne who might be interested in looking into that as well.
Yeah. Yes, but it does, as you can see from the efforts of many people over the years, things happen through grassroots and just individuals joining together to do this kind of work. And so that's what it takes, and going to like you do all the time, go to the city council,
Right.
speak on behalf of issues that are important to maybe quiet members of the community.
Yeah, I really don't have my finger on how members of the community feel, except I know that Laverne has had a great deal more residential development in the foothills than Clermont has had. So that may speak to more proclivity toward development.
Well, yes, and then because of some really great good fortune of having this man, Mr. Garner, donating 1,400 acres to Pomona College, and then Pomona College being willing to not quite donate, but cooperate with the city, that's the good fortune that,
Yes,
yeah, so that's part of the picture.
that's right. Any other questions for the group?
I just want to say thank you. Gosh, it's an amazing effort that's been going on in Claremont, and I was just barely aware of all the history and how that all came together. Thank you for presenting on that.
Thank you, Carolyn.
You're welcome, Arlene.
Is there anybody in the group who would care to unmute their mic and tell us why you decided to tune into this presentation? What brought you to this presentation? Okay.
Well, I will. I just treasure natural areas, and creeping suburbia, scares the hell out of me. We got to have some places where we can get out back into nature and recharge our batteries.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
I tell you one thing, I am just totally impressed by the heavy lifting that so many people did to accomplish what you folks have been able to accomplish.
Yes.
I only wish we had that kind of energy and vision over here. Maybe there are people out there that'll do it. I'll help, but boy, it takes a lot of different people.
Somebody said something very interesting to me a month ago about that was Karen Higgins, and she was instrumental in the development of the group SOLVE, Save Old Laverne's Environment. What she said is if you have a passion for something, you will find the energy for it.
Yeah,
And that's what happens.
And she sure did it.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. She really saved that neighborhood. And right now I'm very concerned about the impact of SB 9 on local neighborhoods, and am very interested in the possibility of exploring having different streets in downtown Laverne designated as historic streets, Because trying to list an entire neighborhood as historic is a great deal of work. So maybe we can go street by street, because at this point, the only homes that are protected against lot splitting and development, which can happen in the absence of any concerns by the city council, they're powerless. And the only houses that are protected are Mills Act houses. So that's an example of what's happening with, as Jay said, that press for urbanization and homes and continued development. So we're feeling it in the hills. We're feeling it in our residential neighborhoods.
So the Laverne specific plan is not enough with its very, pointed preservation. Yeah, that's not enough to do it, huh?
It's not. And Arlene, the Laverne Planning Department did a very interesting PowerPoint, which is on the city website, and it's archived under March the 7th adjourned city council meeting, where they discuss SB 9. Very specifically said that it is the Mills Act houses, and also houses that are in fire prone areas that just have one kind of street in and out access. So I think a lot of the homes in North Laverne that are in gated communities, they would not be allowed to split their properties for subdividing. But that's it. So the Laverne specific plan and the Lordsburg specific plan are not enough.
Wow.
Sherry, have you talked with Pomona folks about what process they went through with districting the various historic districts over there?
Not Pomona. Actually, I was going to contact Monrovia because they have somebody in their group that has gone streetwise by streetwise.
Okay.
So that's a big project that interests me, as does the conserving the foothills area, because really Arlene's made it very clear and opened my eyes to me about the fact that our foothill areas also are worthy of preservation and are also historically important.
Absolutely.
Anybody else who would like to share why they sat in on this meeting tonight?
I hope the students will watch the recorded one, because they're our future, they're our hopes.
That's right. Yep, 20 years from now, we won't be here.
Right.
No, I don't know, some of us won't be here. Others of us will, but yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the group?
Well, Sherry, thank you so much for inviting us. Yeah, and it was kind of an eye opener to look beyond our own borders. So,
well, I appreciate that. It was important for us to see what can be done and think about what we could do and where else we want to go. And I want to thank everybody for sharing. And it may feel like a kind of a tangential presentation, but I think when you think about it in a different way, it really is about history.
Yeah.
Preserving
That's
history.
right. And we're all part of this foothill process along the San Gabriels.
right.
That's right.
The whole
We're
corridor.
all connected.
That's right.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank
Yeah.
you for doing
All
that.
right.
Thanks.
Well,
Good to be with you folks.